Hey there. Welcome, everyone. Today I have the wonderful Laura here with me, and we're going to do a little bit of discussion around her fantastic talk coming up for DevReach. So for those of you who don't know, DevReach is our premier tech conference held in Sofia, Bulgaria, October 25th to 26th. This year it is going to be absolutely fantastic. It's been a couple years since we've been in Sofia, thanks to the pandemic and obviously all sorts of things happening. So we're super excited to be back kind of where we started, and we're thrilled to be back. Laura, thank you so much for coming on with me. We're so happy
Thank
to have
you for inviting me. It's fun to be here.
So I'm going to go ahead and kind of jump right into questions if that's cool, because I think we'll end up doing some introductions kind of as part of that. So I actually saw in one of your talk descriptions on your website that you didn't start out in computer science. You've actually done quite a bit of work on the design side of things. So I would love to hear a little bit about your career journey and kind of how you ended up here.
Yeah, sure. So, I think a lot of people working in the tech industry didn't necessarily come from a computer science background, but I really do more come from a design background. I've always been like into design, like since I was quite small. It was kind of art drifted into design. I liked making things that were functional and not necessarily self-expressive in that way. And so I started making websites. The web, when I was in my early teens, we were just about starting to get internet connections at home. So that was becoming a thing. So the web was becoming a bit more mainstream. So I was like, oh, I want to design all these cool sites and like build forums and things like that. And it was really fun designing all of these things, but I then wanted to actually make them work. I wanted to be able to build them. I wanted to actually make them functional and live in the world. And so I started teaching myself how to code when I was studying design. And I got really into the web because I love the way that all you needed to do is had to afford an internet connection. And at that time, a computer. Couldn't get the internet on the phone then. And you would be able to just learn so much stuff and like teach yourself loads of stuff, learn how to code, learn how to do all sorts of things just by having access to the web. And so the web kind of became the thing that I wanted to design for. Like a lot of design work, especially when you're studying design and going to art school, it can be a
very
little bit
print
pretentious.
focused.
Sure, yeah. And
yes.
things for like high art, stuff to impress people.
Yeah.
It's very, it could be very competitive. And what I liked is this whole grassroots idea of being able to share things, building communities and all of that. So that's what I sort of slowly drifted my way into. So after I finished studying design, I ended up freelancing, doing design and development combined, making small websites. And then I guess over the last 15 years or so, I've kind of gone all over the place. And what I really like is I like being able to focus on the experience for the user from the beginning to the end, and not necessarily just how things work for them, but also things like, well, how does what they're using affect their rights? Like, what about privacy? What about accessibility? What about the business model behind it? What about the sustainability of the product you're using and whether you'll still be able to use it next week? And so I'm interested in all of it and that whole experience, and also how people learn to use the things that we build. So a lot of my focus at the moment is around education and advocacy, because I love being able to make things that are quite complicated and complex and seem intimidating easy to use and approachable for as many people as possible. Like that's the original value of the web to me. So I think everything I do stems from that.
And I think so much of that comes from that design background too, this like real focus on how things are perceived and understood visually. I'm always really interested in that question, selfishly, because I also have a design background. And so I'm always like, I wandered over here with this weird path. Like, how did you get here? So
it's nice to know there's more of us out there as well. I think there are quite a few of us out there. And it's a real advantage as well, being able to access things from different angles and different perspectives.
Just think about problems differently, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, and you work really well with the rest of your team because
Mhm.
there's a lot of false barriers set up in technology between different disciplines. So designers will be in this room and engineers will be in that room, and then you throw your
Yes.
designs over the wall and the editors have to receive them and work out what to do with them. And everyone hates each other because they think they're bad at communicating. And it's because you don't understand what each other are doing enough. And it's what makes great teams is being able to have that cross-disciplinary communication, like being able to share things, being able to collaborate. And that's what makes work more fun as well.
Absolutely. Which actually leads us really well into our next question. I'd love to hear a little bit about what you do right now in your job. I assume it has a lot to do with that kind of communication and helping teams work together.
Yeah, it absolutely does. So I work for Stately. I've been working with them for nearly 2 years now, pretty much since the company was started. So it was founded by David Khorshid, who's the creator of XState, which is a JavaScript library, very, very popular. And that's designed for making state machines for anywhere that JavaScript runs, essentially. It's framework agnostic. And so David decided to form Stately around it in order to build a way of visualizing your state machines. We've got a studio for doing that where you can visualize them, visually edit them, have them synced up with your code base as well, so you can have live, living state machines. And basically, it's a way that teams can communicate and collaborate on their application logic. And so it's a really cool place. So, and one of the reasons why team communication is not just in what we're building, but also we're a really tiny team and we work remotely. And so it's so valuable to have that communication across the team. There's only 9 people. And
Wow.
so we all have to be able to understand each other, be able to work together on things, even if we're not even necessarily working in the same time zones and things like that.
Yeah.
So it's great to have a tool that we can actually use for ourselves as well.
That's really neat. I don't think I realized that Stately was so new or so small, actually. That had to be incredible to
We
get to grow with this
punch
company.
we punch above our weight. I mean, I really mostly speak for the
Yeah.
others here. I think it's 9 people with the output of probably twice as many people without compromising on work-life balance as well.
Mhm.
And because of that, I wear quite a lot of hats at Stately. It's kind of a bit of a joke
Mm.
of like how many hats I end up wearing. But I love it because I've got experience in lots of different areas. I love being able to pitch in on different aspects of what folks are working on. But mostly my focus is around advocacy and education, trying to make the concepts of state machines easier for everyone to understand, trying to make the learning curve, because that's something that people talk about when they start with XState or they start with Stately Studio. It's like, oh, it's a learning curve. It's another thing I have to learn, and trying to
Yeah.
make that easier for everyone.
Sometimes it can feel really hard to feel like yet another tool we have to build into our processes. So, for folks that
Yeah.
haven't done any of this and for whom this might be like a completely new tool, can you tell us a little bit about what a state machine is?
Yeah, absolutely. So a state machine is essentially a way of modeling how something goes from state to state through events, so through something happening. And so there's transitions that move from state to state through those events. And it's a really great way of modeling your app logic. You might be a person who has all of the logic for your app stored in like a series of booleans at the beginning of a sheet somewhere, or and there's like conditionals wrapped around it, and you're not really sure why something works how it does. And sometimes you're like, oh well, this is just very fragile and I don't want to touch it, I don't want to add anything else to it. And or I mean, sometimes worse still, the logic is all in somebody's head and there's one person on the
Often,
team who
yeah.
knows how everything works, or even the two combined. Absolute nightmare. And so state machines are really good for solving that problem because you have a way of constructing the logic in a very straightforward way. Even in code, it's very readable. You can just have it in, if you're using XState, it's like just a JSON object. And so it's very readable to see how it all works. But you can also visualize it, which is what I think is so amazing, is the idea that you can actually see how your app works visually. You can see how it transitions from state to state through these different events. So basically your whole app logic just becomes a series of states and events. And you can model a huge amount of complexity in that, but you can also get a really good overview of how it all works. You can spot, oh, look, that's a state I don't want, or oh, that's transition that shouldn't be able to happen. It makes it much easier to debug stuff, makes it easy to test. And also with that whole communicating with the rest of your team, it makes it easier to work on it together. So be able to show it to someone who may not even be technical and say, hey, look, this is how what we're building works. And that feature you wanted, well, it could fit in here, or it can't fit in because it doesn't work that way.
So these are like really, really easy to understand, it sounds like. I don't think I realized that it was quite that. So it's like a flow chart almost, or?
Yeah, it is just
how is
like
it visually represented?
So I should have thought about preparing something so I could share my screen.
Oh,
but hey, you
you're
have to
good.
wait for the talk to see that, and then you'll be able to see that everything's shared
We did this
visually.
intentionally. You have come to DevReach.
But absolutely think about a flowchart that has certain rules behind it. And what those rules enable is for that to be rendered as code. And not just like with WYSIWYG tools, with no-code tools, where you put all this stuff together visually, and then the code that comes out the other end is embarrassing, and you don't want to show it to anyone. It actually produces like things that could be a part of your code base. You can also import your code into the visual editor so that you can visualize what you've already got. So it is completely bi-directional in that way. And that's one of the things that's so cool is we don't want like, nobody wants more artifacts, more things that just go out of date. And you just, it's you, when you want control of a project and you want to understand how it works, it's so tempting to create all of these like deliverables. I think what designers would think of them as, that's like, right, this is a snapshot of what we've got right now. And then it goes completely out of date. And so having a living state machine, having a living flow diagram, as it could be, that anyone can work on, you can collaborate on, but that keeps up to date with your code because it is your code, then you don't have to worry about it like expiring.
So it will update automatically. So like I'm coding and I finish a feature that adds a new state to a component, push that up, and it automatically is going to update that state chart for me? Or are there other steps?
Oh, absolutely that, and more. So if you want to use the XState VS Code extension, right now you could be writing your code and it will live update on the side, the little visualization, and you can see your state machine. You can also go into that panel and start adding it visually. And you can start dragging and dropping your states and events around. You can start connecting them together and change how they work, and that will update your code as well. And
that's incredibly
so
cool.
it works really well. If some people do prefer to work in code and they feel more natural that way, and that is absolutely fine. But a lot of us do find it easier to start off visually, I guess, especially if you come from a design background, that makes sense. But I think it's not unique to designers. I think a lot of us are visual learners and we like to do things visually. So it is really helpful in that sense, being able to visualize it. And of course, that makes it much easier to communicate with other people because we all find it easier to just look at, was it a picture is worth 1,000 words? A diagram is worth 1,000 lines of code. I just came up with that. I'm a marketing genius here.
You better trademark it because I think everyone else is going to be coming for it real fast. Yeah, that is really neat. So I'm curious, is there like a complexity point in an application when it starts to make sense to kind of switch over to something like that? Or do you think that's something everyone should be using kind of from the get-go? Because sometimes apps are pretty simple and there's not a huge amount of kind of state to keep track of.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, a state machine can be one state that has like multiple events that maybe affect that state. But you could also, you can kind of approach it from either direction. So the stately team itself, we have a load of state machines. We recently we have a GitHub import where you can import all the machines from your GitHub repository. We did that. We have 50 machines in our that are actually for the studio itself. So that's a sign that we really use what we're building.
Yes.
And it was really interesting looking at how they all work. They don't cover the entirety of the app's logic because there are places where it doesn't make sense to use them. There are places where it is, a simple, like a simple Boolean, simple on or off. You don't need something like that. But it is, even when you start getting to just that little bit more complexity, it is really helpful. Often, if you're finding something getting a bit over complex, it can be just a useful exercise in, oh, I actually need to just understand what we're doing here better. So I'm going to try and move it into a state machine to understand fully how it works.
Okay.
And then you have the benefit of it. And I think a lot of the time we do a lot of practicing modeling things, because in order to understand how to help other people do it well, we're trying to really get a hang of all the best practices around modeling machines for ourselves. And a lot of the time you find something is a lot more complex than you realize, or something is a lot simpler than you realize. And a lot of the time the act of modeling it itself is really valuable in just better understanding how your logic works. And so you can come at it from either direction, really. I think both are, of course it's going to be a huge amount of work if you've got a massive, very complex app and you want to suddenly switch it over to a state machine, but the value is there because it makes it so much easier. If you want to add new features in, you need like a couple new states, you've got a couple of new like events that you want the user to be able to trigger. It's all of these things can just really easily be hooked in, and you don't have to worry about, oh, but how's that going to work with the conditional I've got up there? How's that going to work with this feature over here? Because you have the state machine that can orchestrate all of that state for you as well.
Yeah, all I can think of is how much I wish I had had this when I was like onboarding at some past companies, and like how much easier it would have been to figure out the sprawling state situation that they had if there was something visual, or if I could like start making changes and see that reflected immediately. That's got to be great for folks that are just joining a company.
The value in internal documentation in itself is so huge. The idea of even having it visualized, like, I don't know, you made a PR to your repo and you've got like, it just visualizes what the changes are just in the little diagram in your PR. Like that would be so useful to be able to see how it gets affected. And understand, oh, how does this work with all of the other things that I've been working on? Does it not touch my code at all? Then that's fine. I don't need to worry too much about it.
Yep. No, that is really cool. And I'm very excited for your talk. In fact, can you give us like a little bit of info about what exactly you're gonna cover in your talk? You've got, I think, a demo, right?
Yeah, totally. So I'm unsure whether I'm going to be brave enough to do live coding yet, or whether I'm going to try. I'm bad at typing, and I don't want everyone to see how bad I am at typing, but I will do something along those lines. I have a white noise machine app that I've been working on. We've got a dog who sometimes struggles to sleep by himself. Yes, he is very spoiled. And so we have a really great white noise machine. You can go through different sounds, you can go through different volume levels, you can go through different light settings. And I was thinking that would be a really cool thing to model. It actually shows off quite a cool load of things about state charts. In fact, I should probably tell you a little bit about state charts and state machines and how they vary in a second. But what I want to do is I want to show you how I would model that and how it works, how I integrate it into my code, how the bidirectional editing can work, and then we can have some cool like sounds and visualizations as well.
That sounds fantastic.
So on the topic of so I mentioned state charts, and a lot of people will use state machines and state charts fairly interchangeably, and there is a very subtle difference between the two. So state machines are probably more familiar to people who have who've studied computer science, but state charts, they're just like an addition to state machines that allow you to handle more complexity than you could do in a state machine. So it allows you to have things like hierarchies. You can have like nested states, like parent and child states. You can have concurrency. So you can have different states that are doing things at the same time. You can also have communication between different states a lot easier. There's lots of different things that you can use around that. And cool stuff like being able to have a transition, an eventless transition that always happens, or a delayed transition that happens after a certain amount of time, which you can determine. And so there's like lots of extra cool features that you may not be familiar with from state machines you get in state charts. And
that is really, I did not actually realize that they were different. I also kind of thought those were like synonymous terms. So I learned something today, which means I need to attend the talk. Is what I want to be
100%. Yeah, I could learn about. I had a vague idea of what state machines were, and then I saw this guy I knew online but didn't know well called David Khorshid, and he was talking about how great they were. And I looked at it and I was like, oh, this would be really cool for developers and designers working together. And then when I started working with David, I had to learn a lot more about the intricacies of, oh, well, it is the difference between the state machine and the state chart. And so now that's one of the things that I can pass on to everyone else as well.
Oh, that is awesome. Well, we are just about at time for our quick little interview, but to wrap things up, I do want to ask, what are you most excited for at DevReach?
I am excited there are so many talks that I really want to go to. Some of them are before my talk, but I'm going to try really hard to not be so nervous and worried about my talk that I actually get to attend them, because I've actually started making a list of talks that I thought looked really cool. And you're giving 2 talks, aren't you? Because 2 of yours are ones that I've noted down.
Yeah, I think I'm giving a couple. I'll be there emceeing with Alyssa. So we're gonna be busy. They're keeping us on our toes for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, but there's so many talks that hit areas that interest me. Talks about ethics and accessibility, and
I'm looking forward to that ethical one as well. That's on my list.
These image performance, the idea about how we're going to handle authentication in the future, all of these things are so fascinating. So I'm really up. I like speaking at conferences. It gives me a great excuse to attend a conference. And I've never been to Bulgaria before. So it's going to be really exciting. Or we could experience new things together. That will be so fun.
Yep. I am very much looking forward to it. I would love to at some point see your list of talks, because I bet our list of boy, I would really like to hit that are very similar.
Yeah, I'm going to be running around trying to catch as much as I can.
There's a lot. But thank you so much again for coming on. I'm looking forward, of course, to seeing you in person in just a few months. If people are looking to find you online or read some of your stuff before they see you in Bulgaria in October, where can people find you?
You can find me anywhere. If you just search my name, Laura Kalbag, I'm on a bunch of places. Mastodon is probably the best place to find me. And you can find anything to do with Stately at Stately AI. And we do lots of live streams and things like that there, particularly on YouTube and on LinkedIn. So you'll be able to catch me there a lot. I'm always there live streaming.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again for coming on. Folks, I'm going to show one more little teaser trailer for DevReach, and we will catch you guys later. Bye-bye.
See ya.